By the time you finish this audiobook, you will understand the psychology behind self-love, why most people struggle with it, and most importantly, how to build an unbreakable relationship with yourself that becomes your greatest competitive advantage in life. This isn't just about feeling good. This is about rewiring your brain for success, confidence, and genuine happiness. Chapter 1. The Hidden Epidemic, Destroying Your Life. Here's a statistic that will shock you. Studies show that over 85% of people have low self-esteem and struggle with self-acceptance. That means the vast majority of humans on this planet are walking around with a fundamental rejection of who they are. They don't like themselves, they don't trust themselves, and they certainly don't love themselves. But here's what's even more disturbing. Most people don't even realize this is their problem. They think their issues stem from other people, from circumstances, from bad luck, or from not having enough money, success, or recognition. They spend years trying to fix everything external, while completely ignoring the internal foundation that determines everything else. Think about it this way. If you had a friend who constantly criticized you, told you that you weren't good enough, reminded you of every mistake you'd ever made, and never believed in your potential, would you want to spend time with that person? Would you trust their judgment? Would you feel confident and motivated around them? Of course not yet. This is exactly how most people treat themselves every single day. The voice in your head, your internal dialogue, is often more cruel and destructive than your worst enemy would ever be. You tell yourself things you would never say to another human being. You hold yourself to impossible standards, while making excuses for everyone else. You forgive others for their mistakes, but punish yourself for years over things that happened in the past. This internal relationship, this constant self-rejection and self-criticism, creates a cascade of problems that affect every area of your life. When you don't love yourself, you make decisions from a place of unworthiness. You accept less than you deserve. Because deep down, you don't believe you deserve better. You stay in toxic relationships because you don't think you're worthy of healthy love. You don't pursue your dreams because you don't believe you're capable of achieving them. The lack of self-love shows up in subtle ways too. You might find yourself constantly seeking approval from others, unable to make decisions without validation. You might be a perfectionist, never feeling like anything you do is good enough. You might engage in self-sabotage, unconsciously destroying opportunities just when things start going well. You might have trouble setting boundaries, constantly saying yes when you want to say no, or letting people treat you poorly because you don't value yourself enough to demand respect. Research in neuroscience has shown that people with low self-worth have heightened activity in the brain's threat detection system. Their brains are constantly scanning for danger, rejection, and criticism, even when none exists. This chronic state of hypervigilance is exhausting and prevents them from taking the risks necessary for growth and success. When you don't love yourself, you live in constant fear. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of being found out as a fraud. This fear becomes the lens through which you see the world, and it colors every decision you make. You play it safe. You shrink yourself to fit into other people's expectations, and you never fully express who you really are. But perhaps the most tragic consequence of not loving yourself is that you become disconnected from your own wisdom, intuition, and authentic desires. You spend so much time trying to be who you think others want you to be that you lose touch with who you actually are. You make career choices based on what will impress others rather than what fulfills you. You enter relationships based on who others approve of, rather than who truly makes you happy. The good news is that self-love is not some mystical concept that only a lucky few can access. It's a skill that can be learned, developed, and strengthened. But first, you need to understand that this isn't about becoming narcissistic or arrogant. True self-love is about developing a healthy, realistic, and compassionate relationship with yourself. It's about treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding you would show a good friend. When you truly love yourself, everything changes. You make decisions from a place of strength rather than fear. You attract healthier relationships because you model what it looks like to treat yourself well. You pursue opportunities that align with your values and desires, rather than what you think will gain approval. You bounce back from setbacks faster, because your self-worth isn't dependent on external outcomes. Most importantly, when you love yourself, you give others permission to love you fully as well. You stop trying to earn love through performance and start receiving love as the natural birthright that it is. This creates an upward spiral where self-love generates more love, which reinforces your self-worth, which attracts even more positive experiences into your life. Chapter 2. The Science of Self-Worth. To understand how to build genuine self-love, we need to first understand what's happening in your brain when you experience self-worth versus self-rejection. Neuroscience has revealed fascinating insights about how our brains process self-related thoughts and emotions. And this knowledge gives us a roadmap for rewiring our internal relationship. When you think positively about yourself, your brain's reward centers light up, releasing dopamine and serotonin, the same chemicals associated with joy, satisfaction, and well-being. This isn't just feel-good psychology. It's measurable brain chemistry. Neuroimaging studies show that people who practice self-compassion have increased activity in regions associated with emotional regulation, motivation, and resilience. Conversely, when you engage in self-criticism or self-rejection, your brain activates the same regions that respond to physical pain. This is why harsh self-judgment literally hurts, and why people often describe emotional pain in physical terms: heartbreak, gut-wrenching, crushing disappointment. Your brain can't distinguish between physical threats and emotional ones. So, self-attack triggers the same stress response as being chased by a predator. This chronic activation of your stress response system has devastating effects on your health, decision-making ability, and overall life satisfaction. When your brain is in threat mode, it shuts down higher-order thinking functions like creativity, strategic planning, and emotional regulation. You become reactive instead of responsive, making decisions from fear rather than wisdom. Dr. Kristen Neff's groundbreaking research on self-compassion has shown that people who treat themselves with kindness have lower levels of cortisol, the stress hormone that wreaks havoc on your immune system, sleep, and cognitive function. They also show increased heart rate variability, a marker of emotional resilience and the ability to adapt to stress. But here's where it gets really interesting. The brain's neuroplasticity means that you can literally rewire these patterns. Every time you choose self-compassion over self-criticism, you strengthen neural pathways associated with self-acceptance. Every time you speak to yourself with kindness, you're building new brain connections that make self-love more automatic and natural. The default mode network, a network of brain regions active when you're not focused on external tasks, plays a crucial role in self-related thinking. In people with depression and anxiety, this network often generates repetitive, negative thoughts about the self. However, meditation and mindfulness practices can alter the activity of this network, reducing self-critical rumination and increasing self-accepting awareness. Mirror neurons, the brain cells that fire both when you perform an action and when you observe others performing the same action, also play a role in self-love. When you treat yourself with compassion, you're more likely to extend that same compassion to others. This creates positive social interactions that reinforce your sense of worth and belonging. The brain's left prefrontal cortex, associated with approach behaviors and positive emotions, becomes more active in people who practice self-acceptance. Meanwhile, the right prefrontal cortex, linked to withdrawal behaviors and negative emotions, becomes less dominant. This shift literally changes your default emotional state from defensive and self-protective to open and self-affirming. Oxytocin, often called the love hormone, is released not just during bonding with others, but also during self-compassionate moments. When you comfort yourself during difficult times, your brain releases the same bonding chemicals that create feelings of safety and connection in relationships. This is why self-love isn't selfish. It's actually preparing your brain to love others more effectively. The amygdala, your brain's alarm system, becomes less reactive in people who practice self-compassion. This means you're less likely to perceive threats where none exist, less likely to take things personally, and more able to respond to challenges with clarity rather than panic. Your emotional regulation improves dramatically when you stop treating yourself as an enemy. Research has also shown that self-love affects your brain's reward prediction system. When you genuinely appreciate yourself, your brain gets better at recognizing and anticipating positive experiences. This creates an optimistic bias that helps you notice opportunities and possibilities that self-critical people miss entirely. The anterior cingulate cortex, involved in emotional processing and decision-making, shows increased thickness in people who practice loving kindness meditation directed toward themselves. This suggests that self-love literally grows the brain, regions responsible for emotional intelligence and wise decision-making. Perhaps most importantly, neuroimaging studies reveal that self-love activates the caregiving system in your brain, the same neural networks that fire when a parent comforts a child. This means that learning to love yourself isn't just about changing thoughts. It's about activating ancient mammalian systems designed to promote survival, growth, and thriving. Understanding this science is crucial because it shows that self-love isn't a luxury or self-indulgence. It's a biological necessity for optimal brain function. When you love yourself, you're not being weak or selfish. You're creating the neurochemical conditions for peak performance. Emotional resilience and authentic happiness. Chapter 3. How your childhood programmed you to reject yourself. Every human being is born with an innate sense of worth and self-acceptance. Watch any baby or toddler, and you'll see perfect self-love in action. They don't question their right to exist. They don't worry about whether they're good enough. And they express their needs and desires without shame or apology. They are completely comfortable being themselves exactly as they are. So what happens? How do we go from this natural state of self-acceptance to the epidemic of self-rejection that plagues most adults? The answer lies in the programming you received during your most formative years, when your brain was literally being shaped by every interaction, message, and experience your early caregivers, despite their best intentions, likely passed on their own unhealed wounds and unconscious patterns. If your parents struggled with self-love, They couldn't teach you what they didn't know. If they were raised in environments where love was conditional on performance, they unconsciously recreated those same conditions for you. Perhaps you learned that love had to be earned through achievement. Maybe you got attention and praise when you succeeded, but were ignored or criticized when you failed. Your young brain, desperate for survival and connection, internalized the message that your worth was dependent on your performance. This created a lifelong pattern of seeking external validation and never feeling good enough. Or maybe you learned that your emotions were inconvenient or wrong. Perhaps when you cried, you were told to stop being dramatic. When you expressed anger, you were punished. When you showed vulnerability, you were told to toughen up. Your brain learned that parts of your authentic self were unacceptable, creating internal rejection of your own emotional experience. Some children learn that their needs are burdens. They're told they're too much or too sensitive. They learn to minimize themselves, to take up less space, to apologize for existing. These children grow into adults who struggle to ask for what they need and feel guilty for having desires or boundaries. Others learn that love is dangerous because the people who claim to love them also hurt them. Children who experience inconsistent caregiving, where love comes mixed with criticism, neglect, or abuse, develop what psychologists call disorganized attachment. They simultaneously crave love and fear it, creating internal chaos around relationships and self-worth. The trauma of not being seen and accepted for who you truly are creates what Dr. Gabor Mate calls the authentic self-wound. Your authentic self, your natural personality, preferences, and way of being gets buried under layers of adaptive strategies designed to keep you safe and connected. But these strategies, while necessary for childhood survival, become prison walls that prevent genuine self-expression and self-love. In adulthood, your nervous system also gets programmed. During these early years, if your environment was chronically stressful, unpredictable, or emotionally unsafe, your nervous system learned to stay in a state of hypervigilance. This creates adults who are constantly scanning for threats, criticism, and rejection, even in safe environments. The chronic stress makes self-compassion feel foreign and dangerous. Cultural and societal messages also shape your relationship with yourself. You absorbed beliefs about gender success, beauty, and worth that may have nothing to do with your authentic nature. Boys are often taught that emotions are weakness, while girls are taught that anger is unacceptable. These cultural programs create internal conflicts between who you are and who you think you should be. Religious or spiritual environments can also contribute to self-rejection if they emphasize unworthiness, sin, or the need to earn divine love. While many spiritual traditions teach unconditional love, the human interpretation often becomes conditional, creating adults who believe they must be perfect to be worthy of love, even from themselves. School systems that prioritize conformity over individuality teach children that there's a right way and wrong way to be human, creative, sensitive, or differently wired. Children often learn that their natural way of being is problematic. They internalize the message that they need to fix themselves, rather than celebrate their uniqueness. The development of shame plays a crucial role in self-rejection. Shame isn't just feeling bad about something you did. It's feeling bad about who you are. When children are repeatedly made to feel that they are fundamentally flawed or wrong, shame becomes a core part of their identity. They grow up believing that if people really knew them, They would be rejected and abandoned. Perfectionism often develops as a defense against this deep shame. If you can just be perfect enough, smart enough, successful enough, then maybe you'll finally be acceptable. But perfectionism is actually a form of self-abuse, setting impossible standards and punishing yourself for being human. The inner critic, that harsh voice in your head that constantly judges and criticizes, is often an internalized version of critical voices from your past. It might sound like a parent, teacher, or sibling who was particularly harsh, or it might be a compilation of all the critical messages you received, now running on autopilot in your mind. Understanding this programming is crucial because it helps you realize that self-rejection isn't your fault, and it isn't the truth about who you are. These patterns were survival adaptations that helped you navigate difficult circumstances. But what was adaptive then may be destructive now, and it's time to consciously choose new patterns that serve your adult self. The good news is that neuroplasticity means your brain can change at any age. The patterns laid down in childhood are strong, but they're not permanent. With conscious effort and the right tools, you can rewire your brain for self-acceptance and genuine self-love. You can become the loving parent to yourself that you may not have had, giving yourself the unconditional acceptance that every human being deserves. Chapter 4. Breaking free from the prison of external validation. One of the most insidious barriers to self-love is the addiction to external validation. This addiction is so prevalent in our society that most people don't even recognize it as a problem. They think it's normal to need approval from others, to feel good about themselves only when others praise them, and to base their self-worth on external achievements and recognition. But here's the truth. As long as your sense of worth depends on external factors, you will never experience genuine self-love. You'll be trapped in an endless cycle of seeking approval, temporary satisfaction when you get it, and devastating emptiness when you don't. You'll be living your life for other people's opinions, rather than your own values and desires. External validation addiction shows up in countless ways. Maybe you can't make decisions without asking multiple people for their opinions first. Perhaps you constantly check social media for likes and comments, feeling deflated when your posts don't get the response you hoped for. You might stay in jobs, relationships, or living situations that don't fulfill you because they look good to others. Some people become high achievers, not because they're passionate about their goals, but because achievement brings recognition and admiration. They climb the ladder of success, only to discover that each rung requires even more validation. To maintain their sense of worth, they become prisoners of their own success, unable to slow down or change direction without feeling like failures. Others become people pleasers, saying yes when they want to say no, agreeing with opinions they don't share, and molding themselves into whatever shape they think will gain approval. They lose touch with their own preferences, desires, and boundaries in their desperate attempt to be liked and accepted. The digital age has amplified this addiction exponentially. Social media platforms are literally designed to trigger your validation. Seeking mechanisms, every like, comment, and share releases a small hit of dopamine, reinforcing the behavior and making you crave more. You start curating your life for the camera, rather than living it for yourself. But external validation is inherently unstable and unreliable. Other people's opinions change based on their mood, their own insecurities, their personal agendas, and countless factors that have nothing to do with you. Basing your self-worth on such shifting sands guarantees emotional instability and chronic anxiety. Moreover, people often give approval for the wrong reasons. They might like you when you're successful, but withdraw when you struggle. They might approve of you when you conform, but reject you when you express your authentic self. They might praise you for qualities that aren't actually your strengths, while ignoring the things that make you truly unique and valuable. The validation addiction also creates what psychologists call the hedonic treadmill effect. Each dose of external approval provides temporary satisfaction, but your baseline quickly returns to its previous level, requiring even more validation to achieve the same feeling. It's like being addicted to a drug, where you need increasingly larger doses to get high. This addiction is particularly damaging because it prevents you from developing your own internal compass. When you're constantly looking outside yourself for guidance and approval, you never learn to trust your own judgment, intuition, and wisdom. You become disconnected from your authentic self and lose the ability to navigate life from your own center. The fear of disapproval becomes so intense that you start avoiding anything that might trigger criticism or rejection. You play it safe, conforming to others' expectations, and never fully expressing who you really are. You deny parts of yourself that might be controversial, unique, or different, creating internal fragmentation and self-rejection. Breaking free from this addiction requires recognizing that external validation can never fill the void of self-rejection. No amount of praise, approval, or recognition from others can substitute for your own self-acceptance. It's like trying to fill a bucket that has a hole in the bottom. You can pour in all the validation in the world, but it will never stay full. The path to freedom begins with understanding the difference between appreciation and validation. Appreciation is when you enjoy and value recognition from others without needing it for your sense of worth. Validation, addiction, is when you require approval from others to feel okay about yourself. You can learn to appreciate compliments and positive feedback without being dependent on them. You can enjoy success and recognition while knowing that your worth doesn't fluctuate based on external circumstances. This is the difference between having a healthy relationship with feedback versus being addicted to it. Developing internal validation means learning to be your own source of approval and encouragement. It means celebrating your own growth, acknowledging your own efforts, and being proud of yourself, regardless of whether anyone else notices or cares. It means trusting your own judgment and making decisions based on your values rather than others' opinions. This doesn't mean becoming arrogant or dismissive of feedback. Healthy self-love actually makes you more open to constructive criticism because your worth isn't threatened by suggestions for improvement. When you love yourself, you can hear feedback without taking it as a personal attack on your character. The goal is to shift from external validation to internal satisfaction. Instead of asking, "What will people think?" you start asking, "What feels right to me?" Instead of seeking approval, you seek alignment with your authentic self. Instead of performing for others, you start living for yourself. This shift requires courage because it means risking disapproval from others. Some people might not like the authentic you as much as they liked the people-pleasing version. But here's what you'll discover. The people who truly matter will love you more when you're being genuine. And the people who only like the fake version weren't really loving you anyway. When you break free from the validation addiction, you reclaim your power. You stop giving others control over your emotional state. and self-worth. You become internally referenced rather than externally dependent. This is one of the most crucial steps in developing genuine, unshakable self-love. Chapter 5. The Self-Love Foundation System. Now that you understand the barriers to self-love, it's time to build the foundation that will support genuine, lasting self-acceptance. This isn't about positive thinking or superficial affirmations. This is about creating a systematic approach to developing an unshakable relationship with yourself. Based on psychological principles and neuroscience, the foundation of self-love rests on 4 pillars: self-awareness, self-acceptance, self-compassion, and self-care. Each pillar supports and strengthens the others, creating a stable base from which authentic self-love can grow. Let's explore each pillar in detail and give you practical tools for building them. Self-awareness is the first pillar, because you cannot love what you do not know. Most people are strangers to themselves, operating on autopilot without really understanding their thoughts, emotions, patterns, and motivations. They react to life from unconscious programming rather than conscious choice. Developing self-awareness means becoming the observer of your own experience, studying yourself with curiosity rather than judgment. Start by noticing your internal dialogue throughout the day. What tone do you use when speaking to yourself? Are you encouraging and supportive, or critical and harsh? Notice the thoughts that arise in different situations. When you make a mistake, what does your inner voice say? When you succeed, how do you respond to yourself internally? Pay attention to your emotional patterns. What triggers anger, sadness, fear, or joy in you? How do you typically respond to these emotions? Do you suppress them, express them, or get overwhelmed by them? Notice how your emotions affect your body, your energy, and your decision-making. Observe your behavioral patterns. What habits do you have that serve you, and which ones sabotage you? How do you react in relationships when you feel hurt or misunderstood? What patterns keep repeating in your life, and what role do you play in creating them? Self-acceptance is the second pillar, and it's perhaps the most challenging. For people who have been conditioned to believe they need to earn love through improvement. Self-acceptance doesn't mean giving up on growth or becoming complacent. It means acknowledging reality without resistance, embracing your humanity and loving yourself as you are right now, not as you hope to become. True self-acceptance means embracing your shadows as well as your light. You have aspects of your personality that you might not particularly like, but rejecting them only gives them more power. When you accept your jealousy, your fears, your insecurities, and your flaws as part of your human experience, you can work with them consciously rather than being controlled by them unconsciously. Practice the radical acceptance exercise. Look at yourself in the mirror and say, "I accept myself exactly as I am right now." Notice any resistance that arises. The parts of yourself that feel hard to accept are usually the parts that need the most love and integration. Instead of trying to change or fix these aspects, simply acknowledge them with compassion. Self-acceptance also means accepting your past. You cannot change what has already happened, but you can change your relationship to it. Forgive yourself for past mistakes, not because they were okay, but because holding on to shame and regret prevents you from moving forward. Learn from your experiences without punishing yourself for being imperfect. Self-compassion is the third pillar, and it's the antidote to the inner critic that has been running your life. Dr. Kristen Neff defines self-compassion as treating yourself with the same kindness you would show a good friend who is suffering. It involves recognizing your pain, understanding that suffering is part of the human experience, and responding to yourself with care rather than criticism. When you make a mistake or face a setback, instead of attacking yourself with harsh criticism, practice self-compassion. Ask yourself, what do I need right now? Maybe you need comfort, understanding, encouragement, or simply acknowledgement, but this is difficult. Give yourself what you need instead of what you think you deserve, based on your perceived failures. The self-compassion break is a powerful tool. Place your hand on your heart and say, this is a moment of suffering. Suffering is part of life. May I be kind to myself. This simple practice activates your caregiving system and helps regulate your nervous system during difficult times. Self-compassion also involves speaking to yourself with kindness. Notice when your inner voice becomes harsh or critical, and consciously choose different words. Instead of, I'm so stupid, try, I made a mistake, and that's okay. Instead of, I'll never be good enough, try, I'm learning and growing. The language you use with yourself shapes your neural pathways and your emotional reality. Self-care is the fourth pillar, and it goes far beyond bubble baths and spa days. True self-care means taking responsibility for your physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being. It means making choices that honor your needs and support your growth. Even when those choices require discipline or courage, physical self-care includes nourishing your body with healthy food, regular movement, adequate sleep, and medical care when needed. Your body is the vehicle for your life experience, and caring for it is an act of self-love. This doesn't mean perfection or rigidity, but rather mindful attention to what your body needs to function optimally. Emotional self-care involves creating boundaries, processing emotions in healthy ways, and surrounding yourself with positive influences. It means saying no to things that drain your energy, and yes to things that nourish your soul. It includes seeking therapy or counseling when needed, expressing emotions appropriately, and creating space for joy and pleasure in your life. Mental self-care involves feeding your mind with stimulating, positive content while avoiding information and media that increase anxiety or negativity. It means challenging negative thought patterns, learning new skills, and engaging in activities that promote mental clarity and focus. Spiritual self-care, regardless of your religious beliefs, involves connecting with something larger than yourself and finding meaning and purpose in your life. This might include meditation, prayer time, in nature, creative expression, or service to others. It's about nourishing the part of you that seeks transcendence and connection. These four pillars work together synergistically. Self-awareness helps you identify areas where you need more acceptance, compassion, or care. Self-acceptance allows you to be honest about your needs without shame. Self-compassion provides the emotional safety to face difficult truths about yourself. Self-care ensures that you take concrete actions to support your well-being. Building this foundation takes time and consistency. Start with small daily practices in each area and gradually expand them as they become natural habits. Remember that self-love is not a destination, but a practice you're not trying to achieve. Perfect self-love. You're committing to treating yourself with increasing kindness, understanding, and care each day. The foundation system creates the stable base from which all other self-love practices can grow. When you have strong self-awareness, genuine self-acceptance, consistent self-compassion, and attentive self-care, you become truly unshakable. External circumstances may challenge you, but your relationship with yourself remains solid and supportive. Chapter 6. Silencing the Inner Critic Forever. The inner critic is perhaps the most destructive force, preventing you from loving yourself. This voice in your head constantly judges, criticizes, and undermines your confidence. It tells you that you're not good enough, smart enough, attractive enough, or successful enough. It reminds you of every mistake you've ever made and predicts future failures with devastating accuracy. For most people, this inner critic has become so familiar that they mistake it for their own voice, their own thoughts, their own truth. But here's what you need to understand. The inner critic is not you. It's a collection of internalized voices from your past, cultural programming, and survival mechanisms that once served a purpose, but now sabotage your happiness and success. Learning to identify, understand, and ultimately silence this voice is crucial for developing genuine self-love. The inner critic often develops as a protective mechanism during childhood. If you grew up in an environment where criticism was common, your brain learned to criticize yourself first as a way of avoiding external criticism. The logic was simple. If I can find my flaws before others do, maybe I can fix them and avoid rejection. This self-criticism became a strategy for belonging and survival. The critic also emerges from perfectionist tendencies that many people develop as children. If love and approval were conditional on performance, your brain learned that anything less than perfect was dangerous. The inner critic became the enforcer of these impossible standards, constantly pushing you to do better, while simultaneously telling you that your efforts aren't enough. Cultural messages also feed the inner critic. Society bombards us with images and stories of how we should look, behave, and achieve. When we inevitably fall short of these unrealistic standards, the inner critic pounces, using our perceived failures as evidence of our inadequacy. Social media amplifies this. By providing endless opportunities for comparison and judgment, the inner critic is particularly vicious because it knows exactly where your vulnerabilities lie. It knows your deepest fears, your most painful memories, and your strongest desires. It uses this intimate knowledge against you, attacking precisely where you're most sensitive. It might tell you that you're too fat, too old, too lazy, too weird, or too damaged to deserve love and success. What makes the inner critic so destructive is that it operates under the guise of motivation and protection. It convinces you that its harsh criticism is necessary for improvement and success. It tells you that without its constant vigilance, you'll become lazy, complacent, or delusional. But research shows the exact opposite. Self-criticism undermines motivation, creativity, and performance, while increasing anxiety, depression, and self-sabotage. The inner critic creates what psychologists call learned helplessness. When you're constantly told that you're not good enough, you eventually stop trying to improve or take risks. You become paralyzed by the fear of failure and criticism. You shrink your life to avoid potential judgment, missing opportunities and experiences that could bring joy and fulfillment. The critic also engages in cognitive distortions. ways of thinking that are inaccurate but feel true. It might engage in all or nothing thinking, telling you that one mistake means you're a complete failure. It might catastrophize, predicting that minor setbacks will lead to total disaster. It might personalize everything, convincing you that external events are somehow your fault. Mind reading is another favorite tactic of the inner critic. It tells you what other people are thinking about you, usually something negative, without any actual evidence. It might say, everyone thinks you're boring, or they're only being nice because they feel sorry for you. These assumptions feel real, but are usually projections of your own self-doubt. The critic also loves to compare you to others, always finding someone who seems more successful, attractive, or happy. It conveniently ignores your unique strengths and circumstances, focusing only on areas where others appear superior. This comparison trap keeps you in a constant state of inadequacy and envy. To silence the inner critic, you first need to recognize it as a separate entity from your true self. Start paying attention to the tone and content of your internal dialogue. Notice when the voice becomes harsh, critical, or discouraging. Many people are shocked when they actually tune in to how cruelly they speak to themselves throughout the day. Give your inner critic a name and even visualize what it looks like. This helps you create distance between this voice and your authentic self. You might imagine it as a strict teacher, a disappointed parent, or even a cartoon villain. The goal is to stop identifying with this voice and start seeing it as an unwelcome guest in your mental space. Challenge the critic's authority by questioning its statements. When it tells you that you're a failure, ask for evidence. When it predicts catastrophe, examine the likelihood of that outcome. When it compares you to others, remind yourself that you're seeing their highlight reel while living your behind-the-scenes reality. Most of the critic's statements crumble under scrutiny. Develop a compassionate inner voice to counter the critic. This voice speaks to you with the same kindness you would show a beloved friend facing difficulties. It acknowledges challenges without adding judgment. It encourages effort without demanding perfection. It offers comfort during setbacks. Instead of criticism, practice the loving friend technique. When the inner critic attacks, ask yourself, what would I say to a dear friend in this situation? Then say those same compassionate words to yourself. This simple shift can transform your internal dialogue. From enemy to ally, set boundaries with your inner critic, just as you would with any toxic person in your life. When it starts its familiar rant, you can say, "Thank you for sharing, but I'm not interested in your opinion right now." You can refuse to engage with its negativity and choose to focus on more constructive thoughts. Replace critic statements with neutral or positive alternatives. Instead of "I'm so stupid," try "I made a mistake and I can learn from it." Instead of "I'll never succeed," try "This is challenging and I'm figuring it out." The goal isn't to become unrealistically positive, but to stop the assault of unnecessary negativity. Remember that the inner critic's job was to keep you safe and acceptable to others, but it's using outdated information and strategies that no longer serve you. You can acknowledge its original intention while firmly setting it aside. You can say, "Thank you for trying to protect me, but I've got this handled now." Meditation and mindfulness practices are particularly effective for managing the inner critic because they help you observe your thoughts without getting caught up in them. When you can watch the critic's commentary with detached awareness, it loses much of its power to upset and control you. The goal isn't to completely eliminate all critical thoughts. Some discernment and self-reflection are healthy and necessary. The goal is to transform harsh, destructive criticism into gentle, constructive feedback. You want to become your own wise and loving coach, rather than your own worst enemy. As you practice these techniques consistently, you'll notice the inner critic's voice becoming quieter and less frequent. The space once occupied by constant self-attack becomes available for self-encouragement, creativity, and authentic self-expression. This transformation is one of the most liberating experiences you can have on your journey to genuine self-love. Chapter 7. The Emotional Mastery Blueprint. One of the biggest obstacles to self-love is the fear and rejection of your own emotions. Most people have been conditioned to view certain emotions as negative, inappropriate, or dangerous. They've learned to suppress, ignore, or judge their emotional experiences, rather than understanding and working with them. This emotional disconnection creates internal conflict and prevents the deep self-acceptance that genuine love requires. To love yourself fully, you must learn to love all of yourself, including your emotional landscape. This doesn't mean indulging every emotion or acting on every feeling, but rather developing a healthy, mature relationship with your entire emotional range. Emotional mastery isn't about control or suppression. It's about understanding acceptance and skillful response. Every emotion serves a purpose and carries important information about your needs, boundaries, and values. Anger tells you that something important to you is being threatened or violated. Sadness signals loss and the need for comfort and healing. Fear alerts you to potential danger and the need for protection or preparation. Joy indicates alignment with your values and desires. Even seemingly negative emotions like jealousy or shame carry valuable data about your unmet needs and areas for growth. The problem isn't the emotions themselves, but how you've been taught to relate to them. Many people learned in childhood that certain emotions were unacceptable. Boys were often told that sadness and fear were signs of weakness, while girls were taught that anger was inappropriate or unladylike. These messages created internal splits, where parts of your emotional self became rejected and suppressed. When you reject your emotions, you reject parts of yourself. This creates internal fragmentation and self-rejection that undermines self-love. You cannot fully love yourself while simultaneously rejecting core aspects of your human experience. Emotional integration is essential for wholeness and authentic self-acceptance. Emotional suppression also has devastating consequences for your physical and mental health. Research shows that people who chronically suppress emotions have higher rates of heart disease, autoimmune disorders, and mental health issues. Suppressed emotions don't disappear. They get stored in your body and unconscious mind, where they create tension, illness, and destructive behavioral patterns. The first step in emotional mastery is developing emotional awareness. Most people are surprisingly disconnected from their emotional states, operating on autopilot without really noticing what they're feeling. They might know they feel bad or stressed, but can't identify the specific emotions present or understand what triggered them. Start by checking in with yourself multiple times throughout the day. Ask, "What am I feeling right now?" Notice the physical sensations in your body, as emotions are felt as much as they are thought. Anger might feel like heat in your chest or tension in your jaw. Sadness might feel like heaviness in your heart, or tears behind your eyes. Fear might feel like butterflies in your stomach, or tightness in your throat. Expand your emotional vocabulary beyond the basic categories of happy, sad, mad, and afraid. There are hundreds of emotional words that describe subtle variations and combinations of feelings. The more precisely you can identify your emotions, the better you can understand their messages and respond appropriately. Practice the RAIN technique for working with difficult emotions. RAIN stands for recognition, allowance, investigation, and non-identification. First, recognize what emotion is present, without immediately trying to change or fix it. Then allow the emotion to be there, without resistance or judgment. Investigate the emotion with curious compassion, noticing where you feel it in your body and what it might be trying to tell you. Finally, remember that you are not your emotions. You are the awareness that observes them. Emotional regulation doesn't mean controlling your emotions, but rather choosing how to respond to them skillfully. You can feel angry without becoming aggressive. You can experience sadness without becoming depressed. You can notice fear without becoming paralyzed. The emotion provides information, but you choose the action. Develop a toolbox of healthy emotional regulation strategies. Deep breathing activates your parasympathetic nervous system and helps you respond rather than react. Physical movement helps metabolize stress hormones and emotional energy. Journaling helps you process and understand your emotional experiences. Creative expression allows emotions to move through you constructively. Learn to sit with uncomfortable emotions without immediately trying to escape them through distraction substances or compulsive behaviors. Our culture teaches us to avoid discomfort at all costs, but this actually amplifies emotional pain and prevents natural healing. When you can stay present with difficult emotions, they typically move through you more quickly and completely. Practice emotional self-soothing, the ability to comfort yourself during emotional distress. This might involve self-massage, gentle movement, soothing music, or comforting self-talk. The goal is to provide yourself with the care and comfort that you might have needed from others but didn't receive. Develop emotional boundaries, the ability to experience your emotions without taking on others' emotions or allowing others to dictate your emotional state. Empathetic people often struggle with this. Absorbing others' emotions as their own, learning to distinguish between your emotions and others' emotions, is crucial for emotional clarity and self-love. Challenge emotional perfectionism, the belief that you should only feel positive emotions or that negative emotions are signs of failure or weakness. All emotions are part of the human experience, and trying to feel only positive emotions is like trying to have a day with only light and no darkness. Emotional diversity is emotional health. Practice emotional self-compassion by treating yourself with kindness when you're experiencing difficult emotions. Instead of judging yourself for feeling angry, sad, or afraid, offer yourself the same comfort you would give a good friend. Emotional pain hurts enough without adding the extra layer of self-criticism. Understand that emotions are temporary and constantly changing. The intensity you feel right now will not last forever. Emotions are like weather patterns. They arise, peak, and naturally subside when allowed to flow freely. Reminding yourself of this during intense emotional states helps you maintain perspective and avoid getting overwhelmed. Learn to express emotions appropriately. rather than suppressing them or exploding with them. This might mean setting boundaries when you're angry, asking for support when you're sad, or taking protective action when you're afraid. Healthy emotional expression honors both your needs and the needs of others. As you develop emotional mastery, you'll find that your relationship with yourself becomes more accepting and compassionate. You'll stop judging yourself for having human emotions and start appreciating the rich, complex inner world that makes you who you are. This emotional integration is essential for deep, lasting self-love. Chapter 8. Transforming your relationships through self-love. One of the most powerful and immediate benefits of developing genuine self-love is how dramatically it transforms all of your relationships. When you truly love yourself, you show up differently in every interaction. You attract different types of people. You set healthier boundaries, and you create more authentic connections. Most importantly, you stop using relationships to fill the void of self-rejection and start engaging from a place of wholeness and abundance. The relationship you have with yourself is the template for every other relationship in your life. If you're constantly critical, demanding, and unforgiving with yourself, you'll likely attract partners and friends who treat you the same way. If you don't respect your own boundaries, others won't respect them either. If you don't believe you deserve love and kindness, you'll unconsciously choose relationships that confirm this belief. Many people enter relationships from a place of neediness and emptiness, hoping that another person will provide the love, validation, and acceptance they can't give themselves. This creates what psychologists call codependent relationships, where both people are trying to use the other to feel complete. These relationships are inherently unstable because they're based on deficit rather than strength.